not going anywhere. Unlike Bill Belichick, who signed off there as the head coach of the Patriots for 24 years. It's Alex Barth and Cerrone Battle on 98.5, the Sports Hub Sunday Kickoff. We'll be talking mostly Belichick coaching today. You want to join us, 617-779-0985. But first, Cerrone, just hearing that clip, it reminded me, you know what's going to be a great trivia question in like 5 years?
What's that?
Who is the only player Bill Belichick mentioned by name in his farewell press conference?
Oh, man.
There's only one.
I don't even know that just happened.
Tim Tebow.
Tim Tebow.
It was so weird sitting in that room, and he opens up with a Tebow joke. I'm like, what is going on here? This is way too casual. Is he about to say he's staying?
Seen this many cameras since we signed Tebow.
It's the only, and look, I don't fault him for not mentioning any specific players. I understand why he did it. He had so many, and if he starts mentioning players, it becomes about the ones he didn't mention, like who did he leave out, right? That kind of thing. But, and obviously he didn't mean to mention Tebow. That's an off-the-cuff remark, but it was on what was a very surreal day. That might have been the biggest moment where I was like, is any of this real? Is any of what's happening right now real? But it was indeed real. Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots parting ways after 24 years together, 6 Super Bowls together. We're going to kind of go chronologically through the week here in the first hour, and obviously this was what kicked everything off on Thursday. What was your reaction, Cerrone, when you saw the news?
When I first saw it, I mean, we all knew it was coming. We speculated and talked about it for the longest now, and once it was still weird though. Once it finally happened, it was like I said, a couple weeks ago. Once it happens, everybody's going to instantly reflect and think about the good days, the glory days, and there was a hint of sadness in the air. Like, man, it's finally over. Like, dag, the run, everything is just finally over, and it was pretty weird to see. And it's kind of, in a weird way, it's one of those sports moments you remember where you was. You remember, dag, I saw the message, and then I got a phone call like, yo, did you see what happened? It was like 7 o'clock in the morning. Like, what do you mean? What happened? And it was like, well, they finally let him go. And it was just a weird feeling, but, we saw it coming, but it still was a shock to the system.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, wow. I actually, like, outwardly was like, oh, wow. And then another word that I can't say on the air, but like it definitely caught me off guard. And yeah, it still took a minute to sink in. I think that it really sunk in for me. So obviously it's kind of a fire drill that morning. And we had some of the stuff prepared on 98.5thesportshub.com. So that helped. Like we had a post written for if they parted ways. We also had a post written for if he stayed, by the way. I wrote that one. So that was a good half hour spent. We'll never see the light of day. Maybe someday is like a funny thing, but yeah, so, trying to kind of catch some things up in the morning. I put together a quick list of, like, coaches who could replace Bill Belichick. I'm trying to remember. I wrote one other thing, too. I started writing, Belichick's next spots where he could go and coach where it makes most sense for him. Then I go down to Gillette for that press conference. Walking in there, it felt weird because everybody's, not me, but, like, a lot of people dressed, like, to the nines. Like, a lot of people who aren't usually wearing suits. It was way more
a funeral.
crowded than it usually is. No, it really felt like, you're seeing all these people you don't see that often. Everybody's super dressed up. It's more crowded than usual. There's this somber. It really did feel kind of like walking into a funeral. And then obviously we go into the press conference room. I mentioned he tells the Tebow joke, but it was like halfway through. I mean, I'm sitting in the same seat that I've sat for his post-game press conferences for 6 years now. And he's just kind of talking, and it hit me like halfway through, like, wow, I'm never going to hear him like address us again.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm never going to be sitting in this room listening to Bill Belichick again, and that's when it kind of hit. So that was kind of when it sunk in for me. Like you said, like it was kind of expected, and I would say this: a lot of people who don't like Belichick are using this as a victory lap. A lot of people who do still support Belichick are using this to kind of, knock the entire process. I would say two things can be true. It was the greatest run a coach has ever gone on. It will never be matched. Like what Bill Belichick did in New England was spectacular. Nobody will ever replicate it. It's the greatest coaching run of all time. But it was time for things to come to an end. And sometimes it's just time. And that doesn't take away, It doesn't take away from anything that Belichick accomplished or the Patriots accomplished. Certainly not. I remember we did this a little bit with Brady too. It wasn't as much, but people tried to act like the 6 Super Bowls meant less because Brady wasn't going to retire here and he maybe didn't leave on the best terms. I never got that take. It didn't make a ton of sense to me. Yeah. How many of the greats? Michael Jordan played for the Washington Wizards.
Yep.
And nobody's talking about that taken away from the Chicago Bulls, but it was just time. And especially when you listen to Bill talk and you listen to Robert talk and now you see some of these reports, Bill wants to go out, get that record, maybe get one more ring and hang them up. Patriots are looking at, they can be competitive in a year or two, but really have a chance to win some playoff games, make a run in a Super Bowl. You're talking about 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's not Bill's timeline. So the time was right. And it's unfortunate that it got to that point. And I think there's missteps on both sides that allowed it to get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just at the point they were at.
Yeah. I mean, it's you mentioned Michael Jordan. I mean, Don Shula got fired. Jimmy Johnson.
Tom
Bill
Landry,
Walsh,
right?
Yeah, Landry. Right. Landry. All the great coaches you can think of, all the great players you can think of, it all comes to an end eventually. Tom Brady ends his career in Tampa. Like you said, Jordan's in Washington. Wayne Gretzky played for a couple teams. It happens. It never ends. Bobby Orr. It never ends with it's very rarely it ends with the team you started with, an all-time great, coaches, players, whatever, team you started with a Super Bowl being carried out as champions, and it's like, we just 25-year run of 20 championships. It never goes out like that. There's normally something that gets in the way of the player or whatever finishes his career. Phil Jackson finishes coaching career somewhere else. And very similar situation. You see the Bulls thing that happened this weekend where they booed, that
was
Jerry Reinsdorf's wife. That's crazy. But the reason it happened is very similar situation. It was a front office guy who had beef with the coaching staff and ownership and blew up the greatest dynasty of that era in sports. And you let Michael Jordan walk out the door, you let Phil Jackson walk out the door, and the fans still held on to that. And, Jerry Jones' situation with Jimmy Johnson, it always comes to a weird end. Sometimes ego is involved, sometimes pride is involved, or just no longer on the same page when it comes to agreement. There's no agreement there, so guys separate. It happens. And like you said, everybody had their role to blame in this. Then you factor in Bill's in his 70s. I mean, it all just kind of came to an end. It's one of those movies like Traffic where it's like 6 different stories and it all just comes together, for the big conclusion. And I think that's what happened with Bill Belichick and the Patriots. And people are like, well, Bill, Kraft played a major role. So, well, you can't fire the owner. It's his team. So, I mean,
right.
Bill's he's the one guy that you can move, and that's what they decided to do. And we all seen it coming, but it still stings. But it's not going to, for me, who grew up in the era, it's not taking away none of the memories and the bragging rights I had for 2 decades as a Patriots fan. It all kind of came back to me. It did the opposite. I felt more pride, like, we did have a good run. I really appreciated everything you had and didn't really think about the last 4 years. I thought about everything before that. So,
yeah,
it was a pretty strange, cool, but sad moment all in one.
I did too, honestly. So one of the first things I thought of, I don't know why. I mean, I know why this is one of my all-time favorite Belichick moments, but I don't know why, him getting let go. I think I put this on Twitter within like 10 or 15 minutes of him getting fired was the pregame, well, not pregame speech, but the speech he gave the team. I think it's the night before Super Bowl 39.
The parade route?
Yeah. Where it's just like, man, when it was going here, and for 20 years it was, man, that was special. That was just, it's like the last line. So if you're not familiar, and Ryan, I just sent you the clip. I meant to send this. I apologize. I meant to send this to you last night. Bill has the whole team in a room, and it's like they're going to, it's Friday night, Saturday night, whatever it is. It's like their last big team meeting before the Super Bowl. And think about it. They won the Super Bowl last year. They'd won 2 of the last 3. Be pretty easy to get complacent. The Eagles, their best player, Terrell Owens, he's banged up. He's got screws in his knee, ankle, whatever it was. And Bill sits them all down and goes, I just want to let you know, Philadelphia newspapers reporting the Eagles parade route for Tuesday. And he just keeps, like, in the most monotone, he gets real, and he goes, yes, the Eagles will be in double-decker buses. All right, just so you know. Schools will be open. And he keeps going, and the last thing
he reads the whole route. Like, they take a left down Broad Street.
The last thing he says in that clip, it's something about, like, yeah, and the local Air Force base will do a flyover in case you're interested in any of that. And then he just stops talking and lets it sit. And you could, I mean... guys might not have slept between then and the game. Like, they didn't use the door. They ran through the wall out of that room. And I just looked back at that, and it was like, man, we had it so good. We were so lucky to watch this guy coach our team. And, you know, hopefully there's some of that in the next guy. And the next guy wasn't in the room for that speech, but he was in the room certainly for some of those speeches. And that next guy is obviously Gerard Mayo. So like I said off the top here, we're going to kind of chronologically go through the week in the first hour. Bill Belichick out, Gerard Mayo in.